had sent you a list of questions that I thought we could go over.
Yes.
And so we might as well hop in so I don't take up too much of your day. So what exactly is an animal communicator?
So there's so many different varieties, I would say, of animal communicators. And I often call myself an animal intuitive because I think of myself as more than just an animal communicator. But an animal communicator is really somebody who connects with their animals telepathically, usually with other than our known senses. So we're connecting with them. The way I teach it is from our heart and our heart and our third eye to their heart chakra, basically. And so hilarious. So anyways, so telepathic is really, you can receive messages from them and send messages to them. And it can be through words, it can be through impressions, through symbols, through colors, through feelings. Like there's so many, it doesn't always have to be in words. Of course, all my students always wish it was in words, and that's what they're always hoping for. But sometimes we receive it a different way, and then we have to kind of put it through our filter and interpret it a little bit.
Okay. All right. So when did you first realize that you had the talent of communicating with animals?
I'm a believer that everybody has that innate gift within. It may manifest in different ways, but I'm a true believer that everybody has that within. So I would say that when I was younger, I was always very much attuned to this, as most children are, and very interested in it. And then when I became a young teenager, I became horse crazy, and I rode horses a lot. And I feel that the horses really taught me a lot of this, because the way horses communicate is it just like whooshes through the herd. If there's something to tell another horse, it kind of just whooshes through the herd, and they all get that information. So I believe that it happened when I was young, but I believe that everybody has that ability, that gift to be able to do that. It's just a matter of setting up the right circumstances so that it can happen. Just like if you're going to plant a seed and grow a plant, you have to have the right soil, the right water, the right nurture, the right care. It's like that, I believe, as well for people. So it's kind of like, just a matter of being able to activate that gift.
Right. I rode horses too when I was younger, and there's an old, I think it's Indian, but I'm not positive, saying that if you kiss a horse on the nose, that you're forever bonded to it.
Oh, really?
Have you ever heard
I've never heard of that. No, that's so cool.
I always heard that. And if you blow into their nostrils?
Yes.
So what kind of animals do you communicate with?
Uh-oh. My Maltese is hearing that. That could be dangerous. She's a barker. So let's hope she doesn't hear too much. She had to come out for this interview. She's always in my bedroom in the daytime, and of course she had to come out because she heard me talking, and she thought she was missing out on something. So I communicate with every single kind of animal you can imagine. Dogs, cats, horses. I've done in-person sessions on donkeys, on like donkey/burros, on iguanas. I've communicated with gorillas in the zoo, lots of horses, of course. Horses are, I communicate a lot with animals in the afterlife, so animals that have crossed over, kind of like mediumship for animals. You name it. I've probably, hedgehogs. I'm trying to think of all the different ones. Fish. I communicated once with a friend's fish. When I was taking an art class there. So there's all sorts, and I can't always remember all of them, but pretty much any animal or any living being can communicate with you.
Goodness.
There's a puppy.
You hear my puppy?
Yeah, she's going, I hear something, but she's not the barker, thank goodness. Yeah, the barker's laying right in front of my desk though here, so we could be in trouble.
I may have to go get mine and let her out. So what are dogs really telling us?
You know what? Almost anything that you can think of. They really have, I guess where should I start so it makes sense? Basically, oftentimes people go to want to communicate with their animals or want to have an animal communicator communicate with their animals because they have an issue. Like a lot of people don't think of it when everything's going right. It's just like, oh no, I want to fix this, whatever, you know, whatever it happens to be. And, you know, so oftentimes the students will come to learn, and also because they lost an animal companion and they want to stay connected with the spirit of that animal or the soul of that animal, and so there's communication just to help find out what they're feeling, what's going on for them, and to resolve issues. That's a big one. To help with behavior, to help with health issues, you know, in conjunction with a vet, of course. It's never a substitute for veterinary care. And then also, the biggest piece, and the piece that I'm the most passionate about, is that the spiritual teaching and guidance from the animals. That's really the piece that I love. Like, I truly believe that animals are keepers of our soul's divine mission, and they really have access to that. And that's basically like our Akashic records, if you've heard of those. And so they have access to all of that. And during the time that we have our animal companions, they often change us and nudge us in a certain direction, and have a lot of amazing, wonderful guidance to share with us. So that is my biggest passion. I mean, they can share so much deep and interesting and profound and life-changing information to us if we're you know, willing to listen.
Right. That kind of goes into the next question that I had on the list. Your response there, because I had once read a book entitled The Angel by My Side, which was based on a true story of a golden retriever. You said you used to have a golden. Yes,
Jigs.
And I've always remembered that story. I read it quite a while back, but I've always remembered it. And the guy that was in the story, Mike, had some heart conditions and things, had rescued this dog and said that the dog saved his life, and he had returned, had saved the dog from being put to sleep in the street.
Excuse me.
So do you believe that our animals have the soul of animals, or human souls, since we humans are technically animals as well?
You know, I feel that all of our souls are the same. I don't feel that there's a differentiation. And, you know, I've had animals, like a dog maybe say they're going to come back as a cat, or a cat say they're going to come back as a dog. Sometimes because that's what they want, that's what they need to learn. Excuse me for one sec. I forgot to bring my water. I truly believe that a soul is a soul. And I believe a soul can, and you know, there's some people that are still questioning whether animals have souls, which is unbelievable to me. I can't even fathom how that could be, you know. But what I really feel is that a soul can come as any species. You know, one of the pioneer animal communication specialists, Penelope Smith, who kind of brought this to the forefront again. I mean, animal communication has been around forever. It's even mentioned in the Bible. And there was a book written years and years ago in like the 50s or 40s or 30s or something. I read it and I've forgotten the name of it, but it was all about animal communication. But she's the kind of pioneer person who brought it back into my lifetime anyhow. And, you know, when her father was crossing, he told her he was going to come back as a Palomino horse. And I've had animals switch up the species they are, and, you know, so I don't think that we all have to experience every species, but I think that the soul, in the soul's form, has a choice as to what experiences it's going to and wants to have.
Yeah, when he talked about it being his angel, you know, it made it seem more like a human soul than people would think of an animal soul being. So,
you know, I don't think they're different. And I think oftentimes a soul in an animal body is its purest form, and we can sometimes glean the most from them. I know it's less complex than a human life and all of that, but there's so much that they have to share and so much wisdom, and it doesn't seem to be all overshadowed by stories and, you know, things like that.
Right. So are there bad soul animals just as there seem to be bad soul humans?
You know what? I don't feel like any soul is bad. I feel that it's the human side, You know, I feel like something goes on the human side to make a being seem bad, if that's the term we want to use. But I don't really, at a soul level, I believe everybody is pure positive energy, and that soul is residing in a body, and in a human body, just like, and I believe more of the what you would term bad souls tend to be in the human form. You know, there's reasons. Animals don't usually do things for their own gain, you know, other than their needs. You know, there's very rarely that you would find an animal killing just for the sake of killing. You know, there might be the odd, most of the animals that you may see that happen have been a bit influenced by humans who have some issues, you know, because as a rule, animals don't live like that. I mean, if you watch them in nature, you'll see, you know, in my backyard, you know, I look right onto nature out this window here. And, you know, you'll see the birds with the chipmunks, with the rabbits, and they all know who's safe and who's not. And then a hawk will fly in to use my bird bath or something, and everybody else scatter. The cardinals will be in the bushes and stuff, you know. And we even have bald eagles here. We have all kinds of hawks and birds of prey and things like that. So, but they don't just go, the hawk isn't going, I'm just going to go kill a bunch of birds for, you know, it's the food, it's to feed the young, it's part of the circle of life. So I really don't feel that there's bad souls in general, and I feel as a rule the animals are more pure to who they are at a soul level than humans sometimes are.
Right. I've sort of felt like that too. Like it's circumstance or the way someone's raised or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it would go for animals as well as humans, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, there's some animals, like I've had clients that have had animals I had one client that had an animal years ago that I worked with, a Rottweiler, and this Rottweiler attacked them occasionally. And I mean, we talked to her, we went through the whole thing. The Rottweiler loved them to death and was just like a beautiful, wonderful, loyal dog. And every once in a while she'd snap and she'd attack oftentimes the woman of the family. And she put her in the hospital. I mean, it was bad. And then she'd snap right out of it and have this huge remorse. And do you know, in a roundabout way, that dog ended up committing suicide. And we connected with her soul on the other side. And she showed me that she had a brain imbalance, like a chemical imbalance in the brain. And she was happier to have crossed over and then have the opportunity to come back as another, you know, dog in a better body. Because that wasn't her soul. Her soul, when we talked to her soul, she was pure positive love, you know, and light.
So when you do communicate with the animals, how does that session, what is that process of that session?
So the way I do it and the way I teach it is mostly I teach now rather than doing, is that the way it works is you have, like, first of all, you have to prepare yourself, because you have to be, as the vehicle of communication, you have to be, you know, cleared, grounded, centered, balanced. You have to have your brain hemispheres integrated, really, really prepared and ready for the session. So you don't want to come home from a stressful, hairy day and then just jump right into animal communication. You want to feel good, stable, solid, and you want to have a good reading of what's going on in your physical, emotional, and mental body, so that when you start communicating with the animal, if something comes up, you know whether it's your own or theirs. You know, you want to be very clear about yours, then you want to put yourself to the side, you want to tune into them and just, you know, feel, see, hear what is going to happen. For me, I've been doing this for, you know, over 25 years. So I kind of different, I teach certain techniques, but it happens in many, many different ways for me. Like I can receive clairaudient information, clairvoyant, clairsentient, claircognizant. So clairaudient just means I can hear what they're saying sometimes as plain as day. I had a dog I worked with named Ocean years ago, and she had something wrong with her. She wasn't eating. And her, I'm just going to put the puppy down. I think she wants down, and it might be easier for her. So her, she stopped eating, and her people had taken her to the vet. They had they had, had tests. Then they referred her to the specialist at the teaching university hospital, and they went there, and they were still not exact. And she was only 2, and she was starving herself to death, yet she was guarding the food. They had so many dogs, they would feed them in the crates. She was guarding her crate so nobody other dog would go in and eat it, because of course any other dog would just finish their meal and run in and get hers. But she was obviously not wanting not to have her food, but she wouldn't eat. And so anyhow, they ended up having a session with me, to make a long story short. And the first thing out of her mouth was, "It's my duodenum." Like instantaneously, it was like I tuned in, I connected with her, and it was like a flash of lightning. And it worked. It turned out to be true. It was exactly what it was. They found out during an endoscopy the next week. So that's really specific, and there's millions of body parts. I barely even knew what that was, but that's what she told me, and I told her people, and the vets were kind of rolling their eyes like, yeah, right. But it turned out to be right. And then they were a little more interested in how did I know this? So, and then there's other animals that'll send information, like visuals. Like one Great Dane that I worked with years ago as well, that was on 5 medications and having seizures and having a lot of different issues. And she just kept sending me this red heart. It just kept coming at me and then breaking in half, coming at me and breaking in half. And, typically humans would think, oh, she has a broken heart or something like that. That would be what you would think. And I started talking to her person during the session, and she was like, oh my God, I collect hearts. And she was like, and I said, well, do you have a red one? And she's like, yes, one of my best friends who also loves this dog gave me this red heart recently. And I'm like, did it break? Is she, I was going through the process of figuring out what she was meaning by this. And the dog was like, no. And she said, I keep my hearts in the living room, my collection, and I don't let her in there because she's a Great Dane and she's like a bull in a china shop. So that's the only room she doesn't go in. So the dog wouldn't have been showing me that heart unless there was a reason. And finally, the dog just shoots me a picture of her collar. So I said, is she wearing a collar? And she went, oh my gosh, she has a tag on her collar, and it was her vaccination tag. And she was letting me know, and that she had been over-vaccinated, and that was one of her issues from her, that was causing some of her issues and her illnesses that she was on 5 medications for. So, the process is different, I would say, between me and each being I work with, because just like if you went to a party and you talked to 5 different people at the party, it would be 5 different sets of energy, and it might go one way with another person and another way with the other. And just like that, every 2 beings has its own unique we kind of join our fields while we're talking, or sharing information, or, they can actually do claircognizance where it just goes into my body and I know what it is, or they can shine a spotlight on the area that they want the vet to look more closely at, or the area that's hurting them, or anything like that.
Right. So the next question on the list was, how does the animal communicate with you? But you sort of already said telepathically. So
yeah, telepathically, and and that a lot of people think that only means words, and that's the piece I really want people to be aware of. It's very different than just words.
So let's see, I'm running down this list. Are you ever able to help an animal that a trainer or veterinarian is unable to help? And you sort of answered that one as well a little bit.
Yeah, I can say a little bit more about that. And the big thing is I want to be really clear with people that animal communication is not a substitute for veterinary care. It's a great addition. And I've worked many, many times with people and their veterinarians, and I've worked for many veterinarians. I have veterinarians that refer me. But what I want to say is, oftentimes it's not that the vets can't help them or that the trainers can't help them. It's more like there's an extra piece of the puzzle that sometimes in medicine isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's an energetic piece, and if you're not trained in that side of things, that may be something that can help. Sometimes we'll just like finding out that it was the duodenum, which turned out, she ended up having to go on a diet of kangaroo after that. which is really interesting. But with the trainer too, sometimes there's something going on. And if sometimes just me tuning in and listening to the animal and letting them share their story is enough to heal them. Sometimes there's certain things that need to be done energetically. I usually give people an exercise or a bunch of homework kind of thing to do with their animals. And I do some clearing for them. I usually combine it. That's why I don't just do animal communication, because I don't just want to know what's going on. I want to be able to resolve what's going on and clear it.
Right, right. I trained dogs for years, and I always said every dog that I had to train, I always said it was the people really that I was training. It was never the animal, because it was all in the communication.
And they're so different, and their personalities are so different. My Maltese is like the sweetest little thing. She's so innocent. Like I always used to say in the past, if a dog ever attacked her, she'd probably just roll over and go, do what you have to do. You know what I mean? I never even heard her growl. Now, since I got the puppy, the Yorkshire terrorist, as I call her, she was 2 pounds when I got her. I just weighed her this morning. She's finally up to 3 pounds, and that's her full grown. She's going to be a year. But she is so intense. That dog knew she was the boss here with it. She was a baby. She had just left everything she knew that she'd been at for 5 months, came here, and within 10 minutes knew that she was the boss here. And at 5 months old or whatever, 5.5 months old, I guess it was. So she was really, she's really confident, which my Maltese isn't. And she pushes the limits constantly. And sometimes it's hard to deal with. And she was born on September 11th, which is kind of a fitting date for for her to be born, because I keep saying she's a weapon of mass destruction, even though she's 2 pounds or whatever. But each being is so very different, just like each human is different. I mean, you look on the internet and see someone writes something on Facebook or something, and you look at all the different bizarre responses, and how some people will take it positively and go on the upward spiral, and some people will just want to say bad things about you or your situation or whatever, the photograph. It's so different how people's energy goes. So, and animals are the same.
It is. That sort of goes back to what we were talking about situations, how a person's raised and everything. So
yeah, and it's like how it's the DNA, so what they have inherited genetically that comes through. I mean, there's even proof now that with humans. And I can't remember if this was through Bruce Lipton or anyways, there's some proof now that, like, if a past relative was like a prisoner of war or had some injustice done to them, it actually impacts us in this lifetime, even if it's like 5 generations back. So, and then there's the physical side, like illnesses that they had 5 generations back is still kind of in our DNA in some shape or form, and same with our animals. So there's that, what they bring in, there's how they were raised, then there's the environment and the stimulus and all of what's going on now, and and any imbalances that might come from nutritional deficiencies, and there's just so many pieces to it, the whole thing.
Oh yeah,
it's not cut and dried like some people think.
Never. I always see that in training. Just hyper dogs, and people talk about their hyper dogs, and I'll go into their home and everybody in the home is all hyper, and I'm like, you can't expect your dog to be different. If you have to come in with a calm energy. So
yeah, there was one scenario. I used to work with I'm from Toronto, even though I live in Arizona now, and I used to work with a bunch of people who were in the obedience field, and one girl had an obedience hall and center, whatever you want to call it, and they did fly ball, agility, you name it. She was in Super Dogs, which is a it's a performing, have you heard of it? They go around and perform and stuff. And so I even did a training class there on animal communication back in the early 90s. And, she had a dog that had been, he was like in some kind of shed. I mean, it sounds awful, but they had the dogs in their crates. Like they would have crates lined up one on top of the other, and all these dogs who performed, they would go into their crates and wait for their turn to come out and do their thing, because they all had so many dogs. And he was in a crate in a building that was struck by lightning. And it was, he got the worst reaction, because again, all beings are different. And
Right.
when a disaster happens or something horrific like that, each one is going to react differently, just like each child or human is going to react differently. So he was he was panicked. He went into kind of like PTSD in a big way. And she would go to whatever places, and she would have all the dogs in her van. Of course, it would be cool and temperature controlled and everything. And if he got left alone in there, even with the others after that event, he would literally break out. He once broke out of his crate in the car, in the van, and broke out of the van. He would take his nails right off. I mean, he would lose teeth. He just panicked. And we worked with him very successfully. And he was like a different dog when we finished. So it is possible, but his person was very much on board with all of this, and she did what had to be done, as well as have the sessions with me, and it was really rewarding to see something like a dog go from what he was experiencing to a little more relaxed and calm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've experienced panic attacks and anxiety for years, ever since a car accident.
Yes.
And I had wrecked my truck, and it rolled about 5 times. And it took me 8 years to even walk into a large department store, like a Walmart or a Target or anything, because I was just avoiding it, sort of like that dog. It's either fear, flight, or avoidance. And
yes.
So I can relate to that animal, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you can communicate with animals. Can you communicate with humans as well?
Yes, I mean, I don't go around, just to be clear, I don't go around with this turned on at all times. I don't feel that it's good for any human being to go around and start, sitting in the vet's office trying to communicate with every dog in the waiting room or anything like that. Occasionally a dog will sort of try to strike up something with you, but I truly believe that it's healthiest for anybody who works on the invisible realm to find a time and a place that's appropriate for doing it. But yes, I can. And a lot of times during my sessions with the animals, I'll have others come in. I'll often have humans who have crossed over come in to kind of, because they see this kind of portal, this opening, because those loved ones we have on the other side, they want to communicate with us, but they're at a much higher frequency and a different kind of frequency than we're at. So they have to bring ourselves to our frequency to be able to connect with us. And sometimes when they see a session going on, it's a portal for them to kind of come in and share something. And I could, it's interesting. I could do it, and well, I just think the world is going in the direction of telepathy anyhow. I mean, and it's so funny because I'll think of somebody all of a sudden and go, oh, I forgot to phone so-and-so back. And my phone will ding 1 second later and there they are texting me, or a phone will ring. And I'll be like, that is wild. But I mean, that happens to everybody. But I feel like that has been accelerated even more. And I think the way that with the development of the phone, the iPhones and the texting and all of that, it's kind of like, I think texting is already a way, because telepathy is kind of like sending snippets back and forth as opposed to engaging in a full-blown conversation. That can happen with animals too, but I feel like this is a way to, as humans are up-leveling, to the next dimension, I feel like this is, an important part of it. And I think it was Apple that invented all this. I'm not sure, but, I think that it came through to the earth at a time when humanity was ready to start doing this,
To start speaking. There's been stories all throughout history and even in the Bible about people using telepathy to speak.
Yes.
And now we're so used to using our voices. And, if we don't use our voices, people talk about us being quiet. So it's kind of amazing that we've learned to shove that aside and not use it anymore, to a point where most don't know how to use it anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's all. I think that we've turned the corner and we're heading back that way. That's been my experience. But then again, I've been in Sedona for a long time, so I'm living in a world that's a lot different than if you lived in New York City or whatever. If there's a lot of openness here, and that Southwest whole part of the U.S. is a little bit different that way. But I really do feel like we're heading back in that direction. I mean, I think we're heading to a place where a lot more people are going to be opening up their gifts really quickly, and it's apparent even in my even in who's coming into my training programs, the type of people. I mean, I've got a lot of professionals coming in. The baby boomers are aging, and a lot of them are using for some reason, it seems like the later part of people's lives, they're reconnecting back to that. Maybe it has something to do with, before the years before they get ready to make their transition or whatever. I don't know, but there's some kind of real desire for, especially women in their 50s, 60s, even 70s, to kind of reconnect back with this in a really big way.
Right. So are you able to locate and find lost pets?
Yes, I don't do it as much anymore, simply because I have a really full, busy business, and most days I am so crammed with things to do. But we do offer that service in our business. But basically, there's a couple things I want to say about that. I have done it in the past. I don't do as many consults. Most of my consults now are for my students in my programs because I have so many already there. And then I have some of my senior associates that I've trained who do consults for things like that. So sometimes what we can do, I mean, we can always connect in with the soul of that animal. Sometimes we can usually tell if they're in the physical plane or if they've crossed over, but it can be tricky because animals on the spiritual plane it's almost identical to being on the physical plane when you're connecting with them telepathically. So sometimes we have to go through certain processes to try to figure it out. Even Penelope Smith, the pioneer in this field, one of her cats had disappeared for a week when she used to live in Marin County in California. And she had tuned in and really felt that cat had crossed over, and she had kind of accepted it. And one day he just strolled into the house a week later. And, he was on like a spiritual retreat kind of walkabout sort of thing. And he was in such a deep kind of trance where he was that she thought he was crossed over, and he wasn't. And I've worked with animals that have been gone for a long, long time that would still show me that they are alive. Like one of my clients, two cat stories. Can I tell you these two cat stories? Okay, so I'll try to make them as short as I can. One of my clients who lived in the Grand Canyon, her cat got out, and she happened to be in heat to top it off. Probably why she got out. But anyways, she disappeared, and she called me up and had a session with me, and then a week later she had another session, and 2 weeks later she had another session. The cat was adamant that she was still alive. And her friends are going, stop listening to that nutcase in Sedona. There's no way your cat's alive. There's every predator known to man in the Grand Canyon area. And there's hardly any homes, and it's very rugged and rural and, whatever, wild.
Right.
And they kept saying no. And the cat was like, yes, yes, yes. And I kept telling her, yes, the cat is like so adamant in this case. She is alive. She's coming back. And she strolled in the door one day, or came back to the door, and she got in. So she let her in. And I mean, it was weeks. And the funny thing is she wasn't even pregnant, which is kind of funny. She didn't even encounter another cat out there, which was unbelievable, really. And, she came in, and then I had another scenario where I had a longtime client that had a number of cats. And one of her cats was kind of like a shaman, sort of. He was like the sage, the wise sage of the household. And then she had another younger male cat who was coming up and kind of had a similar kind of energy. And he was just getting ready to be neutered. And right before that, he escaped. And she was really upset because the last thing in the world she wanted to do was to contribute to more cats, breeding with all the feral cats or whatever, and creating even more cats with the cat population and the feral population so high.
Right.
So we had sessions over months. I'm talking like 9, 10, 11, 12 months. And this cat was still alive. He was talking to me. He was telling me he was okay. He had food. He had water. He was living a life that he liked. Just like some people want an alternative life to what we would think of as a life that people should have. And what's so interesting about it is I kept, again, people were like, how are you believing her? Your cat's been gone for like over a year now. And I think about a year and a half later, she still put signs up around town. And a year and a half later, a lady phones her and says, I think your cat's living at my place. But he's living kind of like as a wild feral cat sort of thing. And they connected and they realized it was. And he had like journeyed really far, crossed a very busy road, and was living outside at this woman's farm. And she was feeding him, or like land. And I know the area well because it's an area that I used to ride horses at years ago in the general area. And so he was living there, and she said, the lady was really sweet, and she said, he's not, my client said, he's not neutered. If nothing else, would you help me trap him so that we can neuter him? And then I'll see if he wants to come back and live at my house, but whatever is he wants, I'll honor. And she got him back. She had him neutered. She was let him recover in her house. And as soon as he had the option to go, he was gone. And he went back there, and she fed him outside, and that's where he lived. And she just said, I have to honor him. And it was kind of like the cat. The cat said he had that same kind of deep shamanic energy as the other cat that was in the home. And like it was the home wasn't big enough for two of those kind of energies to be together. And there was no animosity or anything. He just wanted a different life, and she was able to honor that as much as it went against her grain, and she loved him deeply and wished he had wanted to stay. So there's been some really, really interesting.
That's amazing.
Communications.
It's a free spirit.
Yeah, and she honored it. Most people aren't willing to honor that. Like, it's hard to do when it's your beloved baby.
Right.
But at least she did the great thing of having the cat neutered so that, at least she was being responsible for an animal that was in her care at one point, which I think it would be great if the whole world was like that.
That's amazing. And you said some people didn't want to believe her. So what do you say to the naysayers that don't believe?
You know what, that's such an interesting question. And I have been asked that years ago in an interview that I did in Victoria, British Columbia. I'm not one that is here to try to convince others to believe what I believe. It's kind of like, the way I believe it, it's kind of like I believe that tonight the sun's going to go down and it's going to get dark, and I believe that tomorrow morning the sun's going to come up. It's like, to me, it just is.
Right.
And, I have such a busy career in this whole field with my training and everything that I barely have time to think about anybody else. But what I ask for every day is I ask that the universe send me those people who will most benefit by what I have to offer, and if someone isn't going to benefit or doesn't believe, I mean, occasionally I'll see posts on my Animal Alchemy Facebook page, and I had a little thread going for a live I did recently, and someone wrote, "That's not the spirit of your animal giving you a message. Those are demons." And I mean, it was like they were talking about, like, I was just like, where does someone get this? I don't know. Like, and I feel sorry for them if they think that the only experience we could have with the invisible realm is that negative. Like, if you think of everything in life, there's a polar opposite to everything, up, down, light, dark. I just can't see how, when somebody has their cat come and sit on their heart chakra and make them feel all warm and fuzzy and feel that love, and then the lady's going, "That's a demon." In my opinion, demons wouldn't behave that way if I've never experienced one, but I sure have experienced amazing connections from the other side. So for me, it's kind of like, I know there's going to be air to breathe, just like I know that animals are going to communicate. So I think there's probably some people in this world who are meant to try to convert the non-believers, but I don't think it's me. I usually work with people who are beginning at a fairly high level of spiritual development, as a rule.
Do you think animals are sort of placed into our lives for a reason? like
100%.
sort of like angels, you know, are around.
Yes.
Do you think certain animals, I guess I should say, are placed into our lives? Like I just got this puppy, and I
Yes.
could have chosen any puppy or gone anywhere and gotten into.
Yes.
Do you think that particular one?
100%. I have goosebumps when you say that all through my arms and legs. And that's one of my big confirmation signs. Yes, 100%. When I got Jigs, my golden retriever, who is the one who prompted me, and I didn't even know this career existed when I got Jigs. I was in Toronto. It was 1993 when he was born. I got him, and I was very successful in real estate. I'd been in real estate for, by the time I left real estate, 18 years. So real estate was, if you're good at real estate, let's just put it this way. I was good at real estate, and it was an easier way to make a living than starting up my animal communication business before there was the internet and before, anybody in most of North America even knew what it was. So it wasn't the easiest path, like it wasn't the easier of the two paths, but Jigs came to me, and within about a week or two started having all these ailments. And I had to figure out, every time I took him to the vet, they go, oh, he's due for another shot, or he needs these drops in his eyes or these pills or whatever. And I mean, he wasn't getting better, and he was a puppy, and I was really devastated, but it was our journey. So he was here to guide me to this work that I used all of my money that I made in real estate to basically, because I'm single, to basically fund all my training, to allow me to go all over and take as much teaching as I could. So I would classes and stuff. So I would have the information I needed, and then to launch this back in the early 90s, maybe mid 90s. I guess about 94 was when I really first started. So anyways, and Jigs might have been born in 92. I'm trying to remember, but anyways, that's irrelevant. So he came to me for that purpose. And I can guarantee you that every being that comes to you has a reason and a purpose for being with you. And sometimes it's in retrospect, looking back, that you can see, but they will take on illnesses for humans. They will help to heal us of whatever's going on with us, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. They will guide us in the direction of our soul's divine mission, as I mentioned earlier, and that's sort of what Jigs did. Jigs is now from the spirit realm. He crossed over in 2007. And from the spirit realm, he is now, one of the guides, and helps all of my students in the work that I teach, the trainings that I teach. So yes, every being, and there's no accidents really, it's really, they all have profound reasons for being with you.
I've said that before. There's always a purpose, even if we can't see it right away.
Yeah, sometimes it's a hard road. Sometimes it's not a fun road. It wasn't fun when Jigs was sick, but yes, you'll see it, and that's amazing.
So I think I have one more question, and that's, what advice would you give to anyone who would like to communicate with their animals?
The more open and clear, like I was talking in one of my trainings yesterday about, you may not be old enough to remember this, but there was this thing when I was young called an Etch-a-Sketch. And it was this funny looking tablet. Of course, there was no computers then, with these two knobs, and you could, turn the knobs and it would draw this kind of picture, and then you could press a button, or you had to shake it and it would all go back to, like, it would clear the screen. And it was sort of like, hitting Alt Control Delete on your computer or something. And, I always say that we need to have a clean slate, a clean, clear slate. So the less, the less stressed out we are, the more centered, the more grounded, the more balanced, the more we can be open and receptive and allow for that. That is one of the biggest pieces. And really feeling with our heart and our third eye, and really kind of sending our messages and receiving messages back from their heart chakras, which is like in the front of their chest. And so that is a key piece. And a lot of people feel like they can't do it, but they all can. Everybody can if they want to. Not if they don't want to and they're not interested. I also believe they can't because they're not going to do what it takes. But there's a lot of faith, and you have to have faith. You have to believe in it. Sometimes you have to, work your imagination a little bit. Like the people that have the hardest time are sometimes people who tend to be engineers or really scientifically oriented, and they've maybe done a huge amount of work to get a degree in something scientific, and all of their energy is like in that right brain, and brain integration is huge. So we can be oriented way to one hemisphere of our brain or way to the other, and we have to be able to for the best animal communication, we want to have our brain our brain hemispheres fully integrated so that we can pull from both sides. And that's a part of my training because it's a necessary piece, I think, to start to have the breakthroughs. So that's one piece. And then the other piece is some of us can get it more, like some of us can get it more telepathic. This is a system that I developed over years of teaching this and noticing that people had breakthroughs in different ways. So sometimes you may, your road into communicating with your animals may be through telepathy. Sometimes it may be through your psychic gifts, which are slightly different. And sometimes it may be through energy, your energetic gifts. So sometimes some people who embark on different healing modalities will start to open up another area, like I call it the 3 pathways. They'll start to open up another pathway through the healing that will start to open up the telepathy or the psychic, which is sort of like dominoes. One opens the other, and it kind of goes from there. So that would be my biggest piece of advice for people, and to be so grateful and acknowledge every little snippet. Sometimes you're not going to hear a book from them. You're going to hear a duodenum, like I did. Yeah, I mean, when I first tuned in with Ocean, I was like, that was in the first like half a second. And then, I was doing a whole session with her, and I kept, going, there must be more to this than that. And she's like, duodenum, like 2x4 over the head finally, And she talked about other stuff, but she got it out there within a second of what was needed. So don't always be looking for more. A lot of people discount that first little flash, and then they want to keep going. And the animal's like, hello, I've told you everything. I'm not saying anymore.
So it just sort of comes through in your mind, in your ear when they're speaking to you, and you just really have to open up and listen and take that in.
Yeah, and it takes practice. It takes practice and time to for some people to be able to allow that to happen. It happens naturally in this world. It's a universal thing. It's universal law in my mind. But we're not always. We don't always. You can't see gravity. You know what I mean? But it's there. Try jumping off, the roof of your house if you don't believe it. But so you can't see these things, but they are there, and you can't always. Like if you said, I want to see gravity. I mean, yeah, you could drop your mouse off your desk or, whatever, and see it that way. But it's always happening. So it's just a matter of us allowing us to acknowledge and interpret. Sometimes it'll come really weird, like, it'll come in the strangest way, and they're still communicating with us, but there's an interpretation piece as well as the receiving of the information sometimes, and how it's interpreted. And the clearer and cleaner we are and if we've done a lot of our own healing work, we're much more able to interpret it in a more accurate way, is my belief.
So in your classes, are you teaching people to communicate with animals for their own personal, or to do it like you do to help others? It's really both. I have something called the Animal Energy Certification Training Program, and it does teach you everything you need. It even gets into the healing side of things. It's incredibly in-depth, and it teaches you everything you need to know whether you want to just do it for your own animals. I have these are the kind of people who come in. People who want to learn to communicate with their own animals
just for their own interest. People who really want to transform and have some more spiritual growth for themselves, because that's a huge piece of it. It's like I call it like an initiation. Learning to communicate with animals is like a spiritual initiation for us. And then some people come in because they're involved in rescue and they want to help other animals in rescue. Maybe they're retired now or heading into retirement, or they own a rescue, or they volunteer at a rescue, and they want to do that. And then I have people who want to do it as a career. I have people who are already doing it as a career come in to take it because there's so many elements that you don't get anywhere else pretty much. These are all, all of my information is channeled basically from jigs and Lucero and put together from some other modalities that I've trained in over the years. But it's, I don't really have two separate tracks. Obviously, if someone wants to start a business afterward, they may need some business training. My training is completely in how to do everything you would need to do in the business, but how to run a business is a whole different ball of wax. I have training for that too, but that people can go into if they want to get to that, stage.
Well, I thank you so much, Miss McKenzie, for coming on today and talking with me. I look forward to sharing this with everyone. And I think you're a beautiful soul.
Oh, thank you
I
so much.
appreciate your work.
Thank you so much. Abundant blessings to you and everybody who watches this.
Thank you so much. And you have a blessed day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.